In the fog-shrouded isolation of Alcatraz, where the relentless crash of waves against jagged rocks drowned out cries of despair, one man transformed his cell into a sanctuary of feathers and flight. Robert Stroud, the infamous Birdman, stared into the abyss of lifelong imprisonment, his hands stained with blood from murders that shocked the nation. Imagine a killer who communed with birds, penning scientific tomes amid the clang of iron bars, his genius clashing with unyielding rage. Who was this enigmatic figure, whose crimes plunged him into America's harshest prisons, only to emerge as a symbol of redemption or deception? Unravel the haunting saga of a man whose life blurred the lines between monster and misunderstood savant, ending in quiet oblivion. The tale of Robert Stroud begins in the bustling port city of Seattle, Washington, a place of towering evergreens and salty sea air, where the promise of the American frontier mingled with the grit of industrial growth. Born on January 28, 1890, to a working-class family, young Robert entered a world fraught with tension and hardship. His father, Samuel Stroud, was a volatile alcoholic, a laborer who drifted between jobs on the docks and in lumber mills, his temper fueled by drink and frustration. Samuel's abusive nature cast a long shadow over the household, with beatings and threats becoming a grim routine. Robert's mother, Elizabeth Jane McCartney Stroud, an Irish immigrant with a resilient spirit, worked tirelessly as a laundress to keep the family afloat, raising Robert and his siblings in a cramped wooden home near the waterfront. The family's instability deepened when Samuel's infidelity shattered any semblance of unity, leaving Elizabeth to shoulder the burden alone after a bitter separation. From his earliest days, Robert absorbed the chaos around him like a sponge, his childhood environment a whirlwind of poverty and peril. Seattle in the 1890s was booming with the Klondike Gold Rush, drawing dreamers and desperados alike. But for the Strouds, it meant scraping by amid the din of ship horns and the stench of fish markets. Robert attended local public schools sporadically, his education interrupted by family upheavals and the need to contribute to the household. At school, he was a bright but unruly student, quick with his fists in playground scraps, earning a reputation as a scrappy fighter among his peers. His friends were few, mostly street urchins who roamed the alleys, engaging in petty thefts like swiping apples from market stalls or sneaking rides on freight trains. Yet beneath the bravado, Robert harbored a keen intellect, devouring books from the public library on adventure tales and natural history, dreaming of escape from his suffocating home. As he entered his teens, the fractures in his family life widened irreparably. At just 13 years old in 1903, Robert fled the abuse, striking out on his own as a runaway. He survived as a transient, hopping trains across the Pacific Northwest, taking odd jobs as a farmhand in rural Washington or a messenger boy in Portland. These wandering years hardened him, exposing him to the underbelly of society, hobo camps where stories of outlaws and quick fortunes circulated around flickering fires. The struggles of independence shaped his mindset profoundly. He learned self-reliance, but also a deep-seated distrust of authority, viewing the world as a battleground where only the cunning survived. Influences from this period included encounters with drifters who spun yarns of the Alaskan frontier, a land of untamed wilderness and gold strikes that promised reinvention. By 18 in 1908, Robert ventured north to Cordova, Alaska, a rough mining town teeming with saloons and prospectors, where the midnight sun and brutal winters tested men's souls. In Alaska, Robert's personality, intelligent yet impulsive, charming when needed but prone to explosive anger, fully emerged.
He worked as a railroad laborer, laying tracks through frozen tundra, his body toughened by the relentless cold and backbreaking toil. It was here that he met F.K. Charlie Von Dahmer, a bartender, and Kitty O'Brien, a dance hall girl and prostitute twice his age, with whom he formed a tumultuous relationship. Robert became her protector, essentially acting as her pimp, navigating the dangerous world of vice in a lawless territory. Dreams of stability flickered briefly. He imagined building a life away from his father's shadow, perhaps striking it rich in the mines or starting a small business, but the harsh realities of exploitation and betrayal eroded those aspirations. Kitty's world introduced him to the seedy undercurrents of human desperation, where loyalty was fleeting and violence a currency. His early influences, from abusive paternal figures to the survivalist ethos of transience, forged a mindset of defiance, where perceived injustices ignited fury. Friends from this era recalled him as articulate and well-read, quoting Shakespeare amid barroom debates, but always with an undercurrent of volatility, as if a storm brewed just beneath the surface.
These formative experiences painted Robert as a product of neglect and necessity, a young man whose intellect clashed with his circumstances. The Pacific Northwest's rugged beauty contrasted sharply with his inner turmoil, embedding a fascination with nature that would later manifest in unexpected ways. Struggles with identity and belonging fueled his restlessness, pushing him toward edges where moral lines blurred. As the 1900s drew to a close, Robert's life teetered on the brink, his dreams of freedom twisted by the very freedoms he chased. Little did he know, a single act of rage in a frozen saloon would catapult him from obscurity into the annals of infamy, forever altering the trajectory of a soul shaped by shadows. As the Alaskan winter of 1909 gripped Cordova in icy isolation, Robert Stroud's simmering resentments boiled over into irreversible violence, marking his irrevocable plunge into the criminal abyss. The catalyst was a dispute rooted in the gritty world of prostitution and debt. Stroud, then 19, had taken up with Kitty O'Brien, managing her affairs in exchange for companionship and profit. When bartender Charlie Von Dahmer allegedly assaulted Kitty and refused to pay her $10 fee, Stroud confronted him in a haze of fury. On January 18th, in Von Dahmer's cabin, a heated argument escalated. Stroud claimed self-defense, but evidence suggested premeditation. He shot Von Dahmer point-blank with a .38 revolver, the blast echoing through the snow-muffled night. Fleeing briefly, Stroud turned himself in days later, his confession laced with justifications of honor and protection. This murder, his first, stemmed not from calculated greed, but from the impulsive protectiveness bred in his turbulent youth, yet it branded him a killer in the eyes of the law. Arrested and tried in the territorial court of Juneau, Stroud's defense painted Von Dahmer as the aggressor, but the jury saw cold-blooded intent. Convicted of manslaughter in August 1909, he received a 12-year sentence, a lenient outcome given the era's harsh justice for such crimes. Shipped to McNeil Island Federal Penitentiary in Washington, Stroud entered the criminal world as inmate number 1853, his reputation initially unremarkable among the thieves and forgers. But prison amplified his defiance. Within months, he clashed with guards and inmates, earning solitary stints for insubordination. A 1911 incident saw him stab a fellow prisoner who informed on him, though charges were dropped for lack of evidence. These early skirmishes built a file of volatility, leading to his 1912 transfer to the more secure Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in Kansas, where the vast prairie winds seemed to mock his confinement. At Leavenworth, Stroud's criminal evolution deepened, his intellect turning toward manipulation amid the regimented hell of iron cells and chain gangs. He immersed himself in legal studies, filing appeals that delayed executions and honed his argumentative prowess. But a pivotal turning point came on March 26, 1916, in the prison mess hall.
Denied a visit from his brother due to a guard's petty enforcement of rules, Stroud snapped. He stabbed Correctional Officer Andrew Turner multiple times with a makeshift knife, the attack witnessed by hundreds, yet swift and lethal. Turner died en route to the hospital, and Stroud's motive, retaliation for perceived cruelty, only fueled his infamy. Tried for first-degree murder in May 1916, he was sentenced to hang, his appeals climbing to President Woodrow Wilson, who commuted it to life imprisonment without parole in 1920, influenced by Stroud's mother's pleas and public petitions. This second murder solidified Stroud's reputation as a dangerous intellect, a man in whose rage could erupt without warning. Yet it also sparked an unlikely transformation. In solitary confinement, he began nurturing injured sparrows that flew into his cell, a hobby tolerated by Warden Thomas R. White. By the 1920s, Stroud's bird-keeping expanded dramatically. He bred canaries, amassing over 300 in specially built aviaries within his cell block. This pursuit wasn't mere pastime. He conducted experiments, developing cures for avian diseases like septicemia, and authored scientific articles smuggled out for publication. His reputation grew beyond prison walls, earning him the moniker Birdman, as newspapers sensationalized the genius killer who healed while he had destroyed. Smuggling operations followed. He sold bird remedies under the brand Stroud Specifics, profiting through a network of outsiders, including a marriage to volunteer Della Mae Jones in 1933, which violated prison rules and drew federal ire.
Major events punctuated this phase. In 1931, a raid uncovered his unauthorized lab, leading to restrictions, but public outcry, fueled by his book Diseases of Canaries, 1933, restored some privileges. His crimes, once raw acts of violence, now intertwined with intellectual pursuits, making him infamous as a paradox, murderer turned ornithologist. Turning points included failed parole bids in the 1930s, denied due to psychiatric evaluations labeling him psychopathic and homosexual, terms that reflected the era's biases. By the late 1930s, his smuggling and correspondence with outsiders alarmed authorities, culminating in a 1942 transfer to Alcatraz, stripping him of his birds. Stroud's criminal history, uncovered like dusty FBI dossiers, reveals a man whose initial impulsivity evolved into calculated defiance, his reputation swelling from local killer to national enigma, a testament to how prison could both cage and cultivate the human spirit's darkest and brightest facets.
The arc of Robert Stroud's incarceration bent toward inevitability after his 1916 guard murder. His life sentence, an ironclad decree that funneled him through America's most unforgiving penal fortresses. Captured in the act within Leavenworth's walls, there was no dramatic chase, just the swift clamp of justice. His death sentence commuted, but his freedom extinguished. He remained at Leavenworth for decades, arriving initially in 1912 as a young offender. His daily existence a grind of labor in the shoe factory or quarry, under the watchful eyes of armed guards patrolling catwalks. The prison, a massive stone edifice amid Kansas fields, hummed with the clamor of 2,000 souls, the rattle of keys, the shuffle of chained feet, the distant shouts echoing off concrete. Stroud's behavior inside was a volatile mix, violent when provoked, manipulative in alliances, yet increasingly reformed through intellect. Early years saw him as a troublemaker, accumulating infractions for fighting and contraband, his solitary stints in the hole forging a steely resolve. But post-1916, in segregation, he channeled rage into study, devouring law books and correspondence courses in French and astronomy. His bird obsession began humbly, rescuing sparrows, then petitioning for canaries, which Warden White granted as a pacifier. By the 1920s, his cell resembled an aviary lab, with cages lining walls, the air filled with chirps and the scent of seed. He behaved quietly here,
avoiding violence to protect his privileges, though manipulative, smuggling manuscripts and marrying Della Jones via proxy to promote his bird business, a move that infuriated officials. Interactions with inmates were limited in segregation, but he corresponded with figures like Clarence Carnes, a young Alcatraz inmate later. No escape attempts marked his record. Stroud preferred legal battles, filing over 50 lawsuits against the system, challenging everything from male censorship to medical care. The atmosphere at Leavenworth was oppressive. Dim bulbs casting long shadows in corridors, the summer heat turning cells into ovens, winter drafts freezing bones. Guards, often ex-military, enforced rules with batons, their uniforms starched symbols of authority Stroud despised. In 1942, authorities deemed him a security risk due to his influence in smuggling, transferring him to Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, The Rock, a fog-enshrouded island in San Francisco Bay where shark-infested waters deterred flight. Arriving shackled on a boat, the chill wind whipping his face, Stroud stepped into a realm of ultimate isolation. His cell in D Block, the segregation unit, was a Spartan 5 by 9 foot space, steel bunk, sink, toilet, and a small table under a barred window offering glimpses of the mainland's tantalizing lights. Daily life was rigidly structured. 6:30 a.m. wake-up to clanging bells, silent meals in the mess hall, food slid through slots for solitaries, followed by limited yard time under sniper towers. No birds allowed. His pleas fell on deaf ears, plunging him into depression.
At Alcatraz, Stroud's demeanor shifted to brooding intellect. He was quiet, rarely violent, but manipulative in petitions for release, earning respect from inmates like Al Capone, whom he glimpsed in the yard, or Machine Gun Kelly, with whom he shared whispered legal advice during brief encounters. The prison pulsed with tension, the moan of foghorns at night, the metallic slam of doors, guards in crisp blues patrolling with rifles. Stroud witnessed the 1946 Battle of Alcatraz uprising from his cell, the gunfire and screams a grim symphony, but he stayed uninvolved. His health declined, diabetes, heart issues, amid the damp air and poor diet, leading to frequent infirmary visits. By the 1950s, advocacy from supporters, including the 1962 film Birdman of Alcatraz, portraying him sympathetically, pressured for transfer. In 1959, aged and ailing, he moved to the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri, a hospital-like facility with softer routines, communal wards, therapy sessions, and library access. Here, he behaved as a model patient, writing an autobiography smuggled out posthumously, interacting cordially with staff and inmates. This final phase, marked by reflection amid beeping monitors and sterile halls, edged toward his twilight, a far cry from the feathered havens of his past. As the 1960s dawned, Robert Stroud's once vibrant mind dimmed within the clinical confines of Springfield's medical prison, his body ravaged by years of incarceration and chronic ills. Transferred there in 1959 at age 69, he spent his final days in a ward bed, battling Bright's disease, diabetes, and arterial sclerosis, conditions exacerbated by decades of subpar care. Confined to a wheelchair, he read voraciously, history, law, even ornithology journals, penning letters to advocates pleading for pardon. On November 21, 1963, the day before President Kennedy's assassination overshadowed national news, Stroud suffered a fatal heart attack in his sleep, discovered lifeless during morning rounds. The cause was ruled natural, an unceremonious end at 73. His body autopsied and buried quietly in a Masonic cemetery in Metropolis, Illinois, near his mother's plot. No fanfare, just a simple marker etched with his name and dates. Public reaction was subdued yet poignant. Obituaries revisited the Birdman myth, contrasting his murders with his avian expertise, while the Kennedy tragedy eclipsed deeper reflection. Supporters mourned a wasted genius.
petitioning posthumously for recognition, but officials remained unmoved, viewing him as an unrepentant killer. His wife, Della Jones, and scattered family expressed quiet grief, her efforts to publish his writings continuing.
History remembers Robert Stroud as a profound paradox, a monster redeemed by intellect, or a manipulative legend masking psychopathy. Portrayed in Burt Lancaster's 1962 film as a gentle soul victimized by the system, the narrative softened his edges, ignoring his violence and diagnoses of sociopathy from prison psychiatrists. In reality, he was denied parole repeatedly for posing a societal threat, his bird work a privilege revoked when it suited authorities. Yet his legacy endures in ornithology. His books, Diseases of Canaries and Stroud's Digest on the Diseases of Birds, advanced avian medicine, influencing breeders and vets long after. Smuggled manuscripts like his autobiography Looking Outward revealed a sharp critic of the penal system, exposing abuses and advocating reform, echoes that resonate in modern prison debates. Culturally, Stroud symbolizes the redemptive power of knowledge amid despair, inspiring books, documentaries, and even songs. His story a cautionary tale of how environment breeds violence, yet the mind can transcend bars. Misunderstood by many, he challenges views on rehabilitation. Was he a product of abuse, his crimes reactions to injustice, or inherently dangerous? His influence lingers in Alcatraz tours, where guides recount the man who spoke to birds while silenced by society. In the quiet flutter of a canary's wing, we glimpse the fragile boundary between captivity and freedom, wondering if Stroud ever truly escaped his own cage. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more stories from the dark past of America's most notorious criminals.